Chapter 1: The Black Empire and the Void's Shadow. In the beginning, long before the first mortal races walked the lands of Azeroth, the cosmos was a place of wild, untamed forces. Far beyond the reach of physical worlds, in a realm of pure shadow, lived the Void Lords. These massive, dark entities watched the physical universe with a deep hunger. They wanted to corrupt the physical world and bend all existence to their will. However, the Void Lords could not easily enter the material universe. They lacked physical form and required a massive amount of energy to cross the barrier between realms. To achieve their goals, they looked for a way to corrupt a sleeping world soul, the spirit of a developing titan. They knew that if they could corrupt a titan before it woke up, they would have an unstoppable instrument of dark power. To carry out this plan, the Void Lords gathered their energies and created massive parasitic creatures. They hurled these dark beings across the great dark beyond, throwing them randomly into the vast emptiness of space. They hoped that some of these parasites would land on worlds that held a sleeping titan soul. These physical manifestations of the void were the old gods. They were giant, mountain-sized collections of flesh, eyes, tentacles and teeth. They drifted through the cold dark of space like dark meteors, waiting to crash into unsuspecting worlds. 4 of these terrifying entities found their way to a young, vibrant world. That world was Azeroth. At the time, Azeroth was a chaotic place dominated by raging elemental forces. When the old gods hit the surface, the impact shook the planet to its core. They did not just land on the surface, they buried themselves deep into the ground. They sank their massive, fleshy roots deep into the crust of the earth, reaching down toward the sleeping world soul below. The first and most powerful of these entities was Yogg-Saron, the 7-headed beast of anger and doubt. He was a colossal mountain of flesh that claimed the heart of the world. Then came Cthulhu, a horror dominated by a giant, unblinking eye and surrounded by a ring of deadly tentacles. Yogg-Saron, known as the Beast of 1,000 Moors, settled in the frozen north, filling the air with maddening whispers. Finally, there was Nedzoth, a master of deception and shadow, who chose the deep, dark places of the world to weave his complex webs of corruption. Upon landing, the old gods did not remain idle. They began to alter the very landscape around them, spreading a dark, organic corruption. To build their empire, they needed servants. The old gods did not build with stone or metal. They grew their civilization out of their own bodies. From their pulsing, bleeding flesh, they shed organic material that quickly evolved into 2 distinct servant races. The first of these races was the Nerukai, also known as the Faceless Ones. These creatures were humanoid, but possessed tentacled faces, crab-like claws, and bodies made of dark, wet muscle. They were intelligent, cruel, and completely loyal to the whispers of their creators. The Nagai acted as the generals and priests of the old gods, directing the growth of their dark territories. The second race was the Ahn'Qiraj. These were insectoid creatures with hard armored shells and sharp cutting limbs. The Ahn'Qiraj were incredibly numerous and possessed a collective mind. They acted as the workers and soldiers of the empire, digging massive tunnels, building towering structures, and swarming over any force that dared to oppose them. Together, the Ner'Graitai and the Ahn'Qiraj built the Black Empire. It was a sprawling, horrific civilization that covered much of the planet's surface. The cities of the Black Empire were unlike anything seen before or since. They were made of black obsidian stone, mixed with living tissue, giant pulsing organs, and towering structures topped with glowing yellow eyes. The air around these cities was thick with purple mist and the constant, maddening hum of ancient whispers. It was a monument to absolute chaos, a place where the physical laws of nature were twisted by the influence of the void. To hum, the rapid rise of the Black Empire did not go unnoticed by the original masters of Azeroth. Before the arrival of the old gods, the planet was ruled by the 4 elemental lords. These elemental entities represented the primal forces of the world: fire, earth, wind and water. For thousands of years, They had fought among themselves in an endless cycle of conflict. They enjoyed the chaos of their eternal wars, but the arrival of the old gods threatened their very existence. The spreading organic flesh of the Black Empire was suffocating the natural elements of the world. Realizing the danger, the four elemental lords decided to do something they had never done before. They put aside their ancient hatreds and joined forces to fight a common enemy: Ragnaros the Fire Lord, Ahn'Qiraj the Wind Lord, Therazane the Stone Mother, and Neptulon the Tidehunter united their armies. Together, they launched a massive, desperate war against the Black Empire. The war between the elementals and the old gods was a conflict of unimaginable scale. The sky burned with fire, and the earth tore itself apart as the armies clashed. Ragnaros summoned massive waves of lava to melt the fleshy towers of the Black Empire. Neptulon directed great floods of water to wash away the swarms of insectoid soldiers. Therazane raised massive walls of rock to crush the faceless ones, while Ahn'Qiraj unleashed violent storms and lightning to tear through the dark skies. For a time, the elemental forces fought with incredible fury, pushing back the dark borders of the empire. But the old gods possessed resources that the elementals could not match. The Nerkai and the Ahn'Qiraj did not feel fear or pain, and their numbers were nearly limitless. For every soldier that fell, the flesh of the old gods birthed dozens more. The sheer weight of numbers began to wear down the elemental armies. Worse still, the old gods used the power of the void to infect the minds of their enemies. They whispered promises of power and sowed discord among the elemental troops. Slowly, the united front of the elementals began to crumble. The old gods targeted the elemental lords one by one, isolating them and overwhelming them with relentless waves of dark soldiers. The elementals lost the war. The old gods did not destroy them, however. They realized that the elemental spirits were valuable tools. Using their dark magic, the old gods enslaved the four elemental lords and bound them to their will. Ragnaros, Ahn'Qiraj, Therazane and Neptulon became the unwilling lieutenants of the Black Empire. Their elemental armies were turned into tools of the void, used to maintain the chaotic environment that the old gods required to thrive. With the elementals defeated and enslaved, the Black Empire reached the height of its power. The entire planet of Azeroth was now a dark, pulsing prison. The sky was permanently black and purple, filled with ash and dark clouds. The oceans were thick with corruption, and the land was covered in a carpet of living, shifting flesh. The old gods had successfully turned a vibrant, natural world into a monument of shadow. Yet, even in their triumph, the old gods could not live in peace. By their very nature, they were creatures of chaos and conflict. Once the external threat of the elementals was gone, the old gods turned on one another. The four entities began a long, brutal civil war for absolute dominance over Azeroth. They did not see themselves as allies working for a shared goal. Each old god believed that they alone should rule the planet and claim the sleeping world soul below. For centuries, the territories of the Black Empire shifted in a constant cycle of war. The armies of Cthulhu clashed with the swarms of Yogg-Saron in the southern regions. Yogg-Saron sent his faceless ones to attack the deep-sea strongholds of N'Zoth. These wars were incredibly destructive, reshaping the geography of the planet over and over again. The servants of the old gods fought and died in millions, only to be absorbed back into the flesh of their masters to be reborn and fight again. This internal conflict actually worked to protect the sleeping titan soul of Azeroth. Because the old gods were so focused on defeating each other, they did not complete the deep corruption of the world soul. They spent their immense energy on building armies and defending their borders, rather than focusing all their power downward. The planet remained in this state of perpetual, self-consuming war for thousands of years. The Black Empire was an ecosystem of absolute madness. It was a world where strength was measured by the depth of one's corruption, and survival depended on one's ability to resist the endless whispers of the void. It was a dark era that seemed destined to last forever, a shadow that had completely covered the light of a young world. But far away in the cosmos, other forces were moving. The pantheon of titans, protectors of order and creators of worlds, were searching the stars. Soon their path would lead them to Azeroth, where they would look down in horror at the writhing dark empire that had taken root on the surface of their lost sibling. Chapter 2. Cthulhu. The Whispers of Ahn'Qiraj. Deep beneath the burning sands of Silithus lies an ancient secret. Long before mortal races walked the world of Azeroth, the cosmos was a chaotic battleground. Eldritch horrors known as the Old Gods fell from the dark spaces between the stars, slamming into the young planet's crust. They rooted themselves deep within the earth, spreading their corrupting tendrils to consume the world's soul sleeping at the core. Among these entities was Cthulhu, a master of chaos, mutation, and psychological torment. For ages, Cthulhu ruled a vast territory during the era of the Black Empire, commanding legions of faceless monsters and insectoid servants. When the massive creators known as the Titans arrived to shape Azeroth, they realized they could not simply rip the old gods from the planet. Doing so would tear the world apart, just as the death of the old god Yogg-Saron had left a permanent, bleeding wound on the face of Azeroth. Instead, the Titans chose a path of eternal containment. They built massive underground prisons to chain the remaining dark gods. For Cthulhu, they constructed the great fortress prison of Ahn'Qiraj, burying it deep beneath the southern deserts of Kalimdor. To guard this prison, the Titans placed their own creations. These were the giant stone-skinned Anubisaths and other Titan-forged guardians. They were programmed with unwavering loyalty and immense physical strength. Their only purpose was to ensure that Cthulhu would never see the light of day again. For thousands of years the prison held. The sands of Silithus shifted silently over the hidden complex, and the world forgot the horror that lay bound beneath the earth. But a god of the void does not sleep as mortals do. Even in deep containment, Cthulhu remained active. His physical body was bound by Titan machinery, but his mind was free to wander. The old god began to project his thoughts outward, sending silent, invisible waves of psychic energy through the stone walls of his prison. These waves carried his whispers. They were not loud, booming voices, but soft, insidious suggestions that wormed their way into the minds of any living creature nearby. The first to feel this pull were the Ahn'Qiraj. The Ahn'Qiraj were an ancient race of aggressive insectoids who had once ruled a massive empire of their own. After losing a great war against the ancient trolls, the Ahn'Qiraj were scattered to the corners of the world. One group of these refugees fled south, drawn by a strange magnetic pull they did not understand. It was the psychic beacon of Cthulhu. They entered the ruins of Ahn'Qiraj, and there the old god began to change them. Cthulhu was an entity that loved to experiment with biological life. Over centuries of close contact, his dark energy seeped into the Ahn'Qiraj, rewriting their physical bodies and their minds. Under his influence, they mutated into a new, highly specialized race known as the Qiraji. Cthulhu designed them to be his perfect army. Some grew massive wings to dominate the skies, while others developed heavy armor and sharp claws to fight on the ground. They were no longer just insects. They were an extension of the old god's own will. Even the mighty Titan-forged guardians were not safe from Cthulhu's whispers. The Anubisaths, who had stood watch over the prison for millennia, slowly began to lose their minds. The constant, quiet murmurs of the old god chipped away at their magical programming. Cthulhu spoke of their abandonment by the Titans. He filled their thoughts with doubts, slowly replacing their duty with a dark devotion to himself. Eventually, the very guardians meant to keep Cthulhu chained became his most loyal soldiers, turning their weapons against any who dared to disturb the prison. For a long time, the Qiraji remained hidden within Ahn'Qiraj, building their strength and digging deep tunnels beneath the desert. But eventually, their numbers grew too large to contain. Around 1,000 years before the modern era, the Night Elves began to explore the southern deserts of Silithus. A young druid named Valstan Staghelm, along with his father, the great archdruid Fandral Staghelm, led an expedition into the region. They accidentally disturbed the hives, and the Qiraji swarmed out of the ancient ruins like a black cloud. This marked the beginning of the War of the Shifting Sands. It was a conflict of unimaginable brutality. The Night Elves found themselves fighting not just a physical army, but a psychological nightmare. As the battles raged across the burning sands, the soldiers began to hear voices in their heads. The whispers of Cthulhu echoed in the minds of the defenders, telling them that their cause was hopeless, that their companions would betray them, and that death was the only escape. And the psychological warfare reached its peak during a crucial battle near the gates of Ahn'Qiraj. Valstan's Staghelm was captured by the Qiraji forces. The insectoid monsters brought the young druid to the front lines, right before the eyes of his father, Fandral. In a cruel display of psychological cruelty, the Qiraji general crushed Valstan to death in front of the Night Elf army. This devastating loss was exactly what Cthulhu wanted. The sight of his son's death shattered Fandral Staghelm's mind. The archdruid fell into a deep despair, and the morale of the Night Elf army collapsed. Seizing the moment, the Qiraji pushed forward, driving the Night Elves out of Silithus, and threatening to conquer all of southern Kalimdor. In their desperation, the Night Elves turned to the dragonflights for help. The bronze dragon Anachronos saw the danger that the Qiraji posed to the timeways and the world. He summoned the red, green and blue dragonflights to join the war. Together, the mortal armies and the great dragons pushed the Qiraji back to the gates of Ahn'Qiraj. But the allies realized they could not destroy the insectoid army completely, nor could they reach the dark god hidden deep within the complex. Instead, they decided to seal the prison once more. Using their combined magical powers, the dragons and the Night Elves erected a massive magical barrier known as the Scarab Wall. This wall blocked all entry and exit from Ahn'Qiraj, locking the Qiraji and their master inside. To ensure the wall could be opened if the need ever arose, they created the Scarab Gong and the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. Fandral Staghelm, still consumed by grief and anger over his son's death, took the scepter and smashed it into pieces, declaring that he would never help the dragons again. For 1,000 years, the Scarab Wall stood silent in the desert. To the outside world, the threat of the Qiraji was over. But behind the magical barrier, the whispers of Cthulhu never stopped. In fact, they grew stronger. The old god used this long period of isolation to gather his power and plan his return. The containment was not a defeat, it was simply a delay. The psychic pressure of Cthulhu's mind began to bleed through the Scarab Wall, affecting the surrounding land of Silithus. The desert became a barren, hostile wasteland, filled with twisted creatures and strange rock formations. Travelers who ventured too close to the wall reported hearing faint, scratching sounds and low voices speaking in a language that made their ears bleed. Many who stayed too long in the desert lost their sanity, driven mad by the invisible presence that watched them from beneath the sands. These whispers eventually reached beyond the borders of Silithus, traveling across the oceans of Azeroth. They found a receptive audience in the Twilight's Hammer cult. Led by the ogre mage Cho'Gall, the cultists worshipped the old gods and sought to bring about the hour of twilight, the end of all things. Guided by the whispers of Cthulhu, Cho'Gall and his followers travelled to Silithus, working in secret to weaken the seals of the prison and prepare for the awakening of their master. The story of Cthulhu is a testament to the terrifying nature of the old gods. They do not need to be physically free to cause devastation. Their greatest weapon is not their physical strength, but their ability to exploit the weaknesses of the mind. Through whispers, lies, and psychological manipulation, Cthulhu managed to turn his jailers into his servants, break the mind of one of the greatest druids in history, and create an army that nearly conquered the world. Even when locked behind a wall of ancient magic, the Dark Master of Ahn'Qiraj remained a constant, silent threat, waiting for the day when his whispers would finally break the chains of his containment. Chapter 3. Yogg-Saron, the Fiend of 1,000 Faces. Deep beneath the frozen, wind-swept mountains of Northrend lies a darkness older than the mortal races of Azeroth. It is a place where the air grows cold and whispers echo through the silent stone. This is Ulduar, a massive city of Titan architecture designed to be a grand monument of order. Yet, beneath its shining gold domes and massive stone arches lies a terrible truth. Ulduar is not just a palace. It is a prison built to hold a cosmic nightmare. Locked in the deepest chambers of this complex is Yogg-Saron, an ancient entity known by many terrifying names, including the Beast with 1,000 Maws and the self-proclaimed God of Death. To understand the scale of Yogg-Saron, one must look back to the primordial past of Azeroth. Long before the rise of the mortal kingdoms, the world was ruled by the Black Empire. This was a chaotic realm dominated by the old gods, massive physical manifestations of the void. They were giant mountains of flesh, eyes and tentacles that burrowed deep into the planet's crust. When the metallic titans of the Pantheon arrived to bring order to the cosmos, they recognized the old gods as a terrible infection. The titans fought a war to cleanse the planet, but they soon realized a horrifying reality. The old gods had dug their roots so deep into the world soul of Azeroth that pulling them out completely would shatter the planet itself. And because they could not kill the old gods without destroying the very world they sought to save, the Titans chose a different path. They decided to imprison them deep underground. For Yogg-Saron, they chose the far northern reaches of the world, building the vast complex of Ulduar around its physical form. To ensure that this monster would never escape, the Titans created the Keepers. These were powerful, giant beings forged from metal and stone, infused with the specific powers of the Pantheon members themselves. Keepers like Tyr, Odin, Loken, Thorim, Hoidir, Freya, and Mimiron were charged with guarding the prison and maintaining the machinery of order on Azeroth. Among the most important of these machines was the Forge of Wills, located deep within the halls of Ulduar. This forge was a marvelous creation of light and magic, designed to draw upon the life essence of the world soul, to create new generations of Titan-forged servants. These servants, made of iron, stone and bronze, were designed to be perfect and tireless workers. They did not feel pain, they did not grow old, and they were entirely loyal to the grand design of the Titans. With the Keepers watching, and the Forge of Wills creating, the prison of Yogg-Saron seemed completely secure. For many thousands of years, the system worked perfectly, and the old god remained bound in the dark. However, the Titans made a fundamental mistake. They assumed that a physical prison could stop an enemy whose greatest weapon was the mind. Even from deep within its cage, Yogg-Saron could whisper. Its dark thoughts leaked out through the stone, corrupting the very ground of Northrend. This corruption manifested physically as a strange black metal known as Saronite. Saronite was the crystallized blood of the old god, and anyone who stayed near it for too long would begin to hear voices, slowly losing their sanity to the madness of the beast. The turning point for Ulduar came when a tragic event occurred far across the cosmos. The Pantheon of Titans was defeated by the Dark Titan Sargeras. Though the Keepers on Azeroth did not fully understand what had happened, they felt a sudden, profound silence. The Grand Creators had stopped speaking to them. This silence filled the Keepers with deep confusion, sadness and doubt. They felt abandoned and lost. Yogg-Saron, highly sensitive to emotional shifts, felt this wave of weakness wash over its jailers. It realized that the Keepers were no longer protected by the constant guidance of their creators. The time to strike had come. Yogg-Saron focused its whispers on one specific keeper, Loken, the prime designate of Ulduar. Loken was brilliant, but he was also vulnerable. He had developed a secret, forbidden love for Sif, the wife of his brother Thorim. Yogg-Saron saw this hidden passion and began to twist Loken's thoughts. The old god filled Loken's mind with intense paranoia, making him believe that Sif was going to reveal their secret affair to Thorim. In a fit of manufactured panic and rage, Loken confronted Sif and accidentally killed her. Horrified by what he had done, Loken fell into deep despair. He knew that if the other Keepers, especially Thorim and Tyr, discovered his crime, his life would be forfeit. Seizing this moment of absolute terror, Yogg-Saron appeared to Loken in the guise of an illusion, pretending to be the spirit of the deceased Sith. The illusion told Loken that the only way to save himself was to lie. It instructed him to tell Thorim that the king of the frost giants, Ahn'Qiraj, had murdered Sif. Loken followed the advice of the illusion. Thorim, consumed by grief and fury, believed the lie and went to war against the frost giants, destroying their kingdom and shattering the ancient peace of Northrend. Seeing the destruction he had caused, Thorim fell into a deep depression, abandoning his duties and retreating to his temple in isolation. With Thorim out of the way, Loken's grip on sanity slipped even further. He realized that he was now completely under the influence of the entity in the dark, but he was too afraid of the other keepers to stop. Under Yogg-Saron's quiet guidance, Loken began to systematically neutralize his fellow keepers to hide his treachery. He attacked Mimiron, the great inventor. Although Mimiron was killed, his mechanome servants managed to save his active spark, building him a new mechanical body, but the trauma left him confused and easily manipulated. Loken then used his dark power to subdue Hodir and Freya, locking them away in their respective temples within Ulduar, where Yogg-Saron's whispers could slowly warp their minds. Only Tyr, the Keeper of Justice, suspected that something was deeply wrong with Loken. Along with the archivist Archidus and the giant Ironire, Tyr gathered a group of loyal Titan-forged and fled south, taking with them the discs of Norgannon, which contained the true history of Azeroth. Loken sent terrible monsters, known as the Cathraxi, to hunt them down, resulting in a legendary battle where Tyr sacrificed his life to save his companions. With Tyr dead and the other keepers either corrupted or in hiding, Loken had complete control over Ulduar and the machinery of the Titans. This control allowed Yogg-Saron to execute its most devastating masterstroke. Through Loken, the old god accessed the Forge of Wills. It did not destroy the Forge. Instead, it introduced a subtle viral corruption into the creation process. This corruption was the Curse of Flesh. The Curse of Flesh was designed with terrifying brilliance. Every new Titan-forged being created by the corrupted Forge of Wills would no longer be made of stone and metal. Instead, their bodies would slowly soften, turning into skin, muscle and bone. Even the older generations of Titan-forged, who had been created before the corruption, were not safe. The curse acted like a slow, contagious disease, spreading from one generation to the next, slowly altering their physical makeup. On a physical level, this curse made the creations of the Titans weak. Stone bodies that could withstand the pressure of deep mountains became soft and easily bruised. Metal joints that could move forever without wearing down became susceptible to fatigue and disease. The immortal servants of order were suddenly given a lifespan. They could grow old, they could bleed, and they could die. But the physical transformation was only part of Yogg-Saron's design. The true genius of the Curse of Flesh was psychological and spiritual. By turning these stone and metal beings into flesh, Yogg-Saron made them vulnerable to emotions. For the first time, these creations felt fear, pain, doubt, and greed. In the eyes of the old god, a being that can feel fear is a being that can be easily manipulated. A being that can feel pain is a being that can be broken. The Curse of Flesh was created to facilitate assimilation, making it incredibly easy for the old gods to corrupt the minds of these new mortal creatures. Over thousands of years, this curse shaped the face of Azeroth. The heavy, stone-skinned earthen slowly became the dwarves. The small, clockwork mechanomes became the organic gnomes. The massive iron Vrykul became the humans. Many other mortal races of Azeroth can trace their lineage directly back to this cosmic affliction. Yet, this dark plan had an unintended consequence. Yogg-Saron had designed the Curse of Flesh to weaken the defenses of Azeroth, believing that soft mortal creatures would be helpless against the power of the Void. But in doing so, the old god gave these new mortals something the cold, mechanical Titan-forged never truly possessed: adaptability, passion, and a fierce will to survive, while the stone servants of the Titans followed rigid programming. The mortal races possessed the chaotic spark of creativity and free will. When the forces of mortal heroes eventually entered Ulduar to confront the corrupted keepers and face Yogg-Saron itself, they did so not as cold machines of order, but as beings of flesh and blood. They used the very traits born from the curse: their passion, their love for their world, and their refusal to yield to fear, to overcome the madness of the old god. The god of death had sought to claim Azeroth by turning its protectors into flesh, but in doing so, it unwittingly created the very champions who would rise up to seal its doom. The story of Yogg-Saron is a dark reminder of how easily the grandest designs of order can be corrupted by whisper and doubt, leaving a legacy of flesh and mortality that continues to shape the history of the world. Chapter 4. Yogg-Saron, the Seven Heads of Anger. Long before the mortal races walked the fields of Azeroth, the world was a dark, chaotic kingdom ruled by the Black Empire. At the very peak of this dark empire sat the most powerful and massive of the old gods, a colossal entity of pure void known as Yogg-Saron. He was called the Beast with 7 heads, and some whispered of him as a black goat with 7 eyes that watched from the dark outside of reality. While the other old gods, like Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron, spread their corruption across the northern and western lands, Yogg-Saron claimed the fertile southern regions. His power was absolute, and he ruled over vast swarms of insect-like servants, the Ahn'Qiraj and the Mantid, who built giant temple cities in his honor. To look upon Yogg-Saron was to look upon the very concept of despair, a force of such overwhelming malice that it could bend the minds of the strongest creatures to its will. The physical form of Yogg-Saron was a nightmare of biological horror. His colossal body was deeply rooted into the crust of the young planet, sending thousands of black, fleshy tentacles miles beneath the surface. These tendrils wrapped themselves tightly around the sleeping world soul of Azeroth, slowly feeding on its cosmic energy and injecting dark void magic directly into the planet's heart. On the surface, his 7 monstrous heads rose high into the darkened sky, exhaling clouds of dark shadow and poisonous vapor. The insectoid Mantid worshipped him as their god-emperor, believing that his word was the law of the cosmos. For countless ages, Yogg-Saron remained unchallenged, a mountain of flesh, eyes and jaws that seemed completely impossible to destroy. The balance of power shifted dramatically when the pantheon of titans arrived in the skies of Azeroth. These metallic giants of order, led by Highfather Aman'Thul, looked down upon the infested planet with horror and sadness. They saw that the beautiful world soul they had come to save was covered in the corrupting flesh of the Black Empire. To fight this threat, the Titans created a mighty army of stone and metal constructs, the Titan Forged. Led by powerful keepers, these artificial armies marched against the forces of the old gods, tearing down the obsidian obelisks of the Black Empire and pushing back the endless swarms of insectoid servants. As the war progressed, the Titan-forged armies pushed deep into the southern territories of Yogg-Saron. However, as they drew closer to the grand temple city of the 7-headed beast, they realized the true horror of their enemy. Yogg-Saron's influence was too strong for the stone and metal soldiers to endure. The old god did not just fight with physical claws and teeth, he fought with the mind. His many heads whispered dark thoughts into the minds of the Titan-forged. He pulled out their deepest anxieties, turning their loyalty into doubt, their courage into fear, and their duty into anger. The armies of order began to break apart, their minds poisoned by the mere presence of the beast. Seeing his armies fall into madness and despair, Highfather Aman'Thul realized that his creations could not defeat Yogg-Saron on their own. The leader of the Titans decided that he had to take direct action to save the world soul. From the celestial heights, Aman'Thul reached down through the clouds of Azeroth, his colossal hand of pure light and order descending like a falling star. He bypassed the armies, bypassed the temples, and gripped the main body of Yogg-Saron with a force that shook the very foundations of the planet. With one massive, violent pull, the Titan Highfather ripped the giant old god out of the crust of the earth, tearing him away from the planet he had infested. For a brief moment, It seemed like a glorious victory, but the consequences of this act were immediate and terrifying. Yogg-Saron had dug his roots so deeply into the planet's core that ripping him out was like tearing a vital organ from a living body. The earth cracked open, and a massive, gaping wound tore across the surface of Azeroth. From this bottomless rift, the silver-blue lifeblood of the world's soul began to pour out in a violent torrent. The Titans watched in horror as the very life of the planet they wished to save began to bleed into the cold void of space. Ahn'Qiraj realized, too late, that the old gods had bound themselves so closely to Azeroth that killing them directly could destroy the planet itself. While the Titans rushed to seal the bleeding wound, which would eventually be shaped and stabilized into the Well of Eternity, Yogg-Saron met his physical end. The physical body of the colossal beast was shattered as it was pulled into the upper atmosphere, but the old god would not die quietly. In his very last moments, as his massive form broke apart, Yogg-Saron let out one final, terrible breath. This dying gasp was filled with all the malice, hatred, and negative energy of his being. The breath fell back to the earth, washing over the southern lands of the continent and sinking deep into the soil. This final curse of Yogg-Saron did not simply fade away. Instead, it took on a physical, spiritual form, giving birth to the Shah. The Shah were dark, shadowy spirits of pure negative emotion, born directly from the 7 heads of the dead old god. Each head represented a specific weakness of the mortal mind. These spirits became known as the Shah of anger, the Shah of hatred, the Shah of violence, the Shah of fear, the Shah of doubt, the Shah of despair, and the Shah of pride. For thousands of years, these dark spirits haunted the southern lands, feeding on the negative emotions of anyone who stepped foot on the soil. If a person felt anger, the Shah would grow stronger. If they felt fear, the Shah would take physical shape and destroy them. The people who lived in this region, the peaceful Pandaren, learnt that they could not fight the Shah with weapons. Instead, they had to fight them within their own hearts. To survive the curse of Yogg-Saron, the inhabitants of the continent had to master their emotions, practicing peace, patience, and inner calm. When the land was eventually shrouded in a thick mist to protect it from the Great Sundering, the continent became known as Pandaria. Yet, beneath the beautiful green hills and golden valleys, the shadow of the dead old god remained, waiting for a single moment of weakness to rise again. Although Yogg-Saron's body was destroyed, his physical heart did not perish. Unlike the rest of his shattered form, the dark, massive heart of the old god landed on the earth, still beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. The Titan-forged keeper Ra, also known as Raden, discovered this horrifying relic of the beast. Recognizing the dark power that still pulsed within it, Ra did not attempt to destroy it, fearing that doing so would unleash even more corruption. Instead, he built a massive underground vault deep beneath the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. There, the heart of Yogg-Saron was sealed away in a chamber of pure order, guarded by powerful Titan magic to ensure it would never see the light of day. For 10,000 years, the heart lay silent and forgotten in the dark. But the legacy of the old god was not easily buried. In the modern era, when the mortal races of the Alliance and the Horde discovered the hidden continent of Pandaria, they brought their long-standing hatred and war with them. The violent clash of these factions acted as fuel for the dormant Shah. Across the valleys, the dark spirits broke free from their ancient prisons, feeding on the anger and fear of the invading soldiers. The peace that the Pandaren had fought so hard to maintain for generations was shattered in a matter of weeks as the land began to bleed black shadow once more. The ultimate tragedy occurred when Garrosh Hellscream, the power-hungry war chief of the Horde, discovered the vault of Yogg-Saron. Desperate for a weapon to defeat his enemies, Garrosh ignored all warnings and excavated the still-beating heart from its ancient prison. He cast the dark relic into the sacred pools of the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, hoping to absorb its dark power. The reaction was catastrophic. The pure waters of the Veil were instantly corrupted, turning into a dead, blackened wasteland. The final and most dangerous Shah, the Shah of Pride, was unleashed upon the world, driving the warchief and his followers into a state of blind arrogance. In the end, the mortal champions of Azeroth were forced to clean up the ancient mistake of the Titans. They marched into the heart of Orgrimmar, where Garrosh had brought the heart of Yogg-Saron to build his dark empire anew. In a desperate battle, the heroes defeated the corrupted warchief and drained the last remaining drops of power from the beating heart. With the destruction of the heart and the defeat of the Seven Shah, the physical echo of Yogg-Saron was finally silenced. The story of Yogg-Saron serves as a dark warning about the true nature of the old gods. They are not merely monsters that can be slain with brute force. They are cancer-like entities that bind themselves to the very life of the world. Amanthal's attempt to rip the beast from the earth almost killed Azeroth, and the resulting curse plagued an entire continent for millennia. Even in death, the seven heads of anger, hatred, and fear proved that the dark power of the void can never be truly erased, leaving a scar on the history of Azeroth that will never fully heal. Chapter 5. N'Zoth, the Corruptor of the Deep. Deep beneath the dark, heavy waters of the Great Sea, there is a place where the light of the sun has never reached. In this freezing, silent abyss, a massive entity has waited for thousands of years. This is N'Zoth, known to history as the Corruptor, the drowned god, and the master of the sunken city. Among the ancient, terrible beings known as the Old Gods, N'Zoth was never the strongest in physical power. His brothers, like the many-eyed Cthulhu and the monstrous Yogg-Saron, possessed raw, world-shaking strength. Yet, N'Zoth was always the most dangerous of them all. He did not rely on brute force. Instead, he relied on patience, cunning, and the quiet power of whispers. He is a master of manipulation, an entity that can turn a person's deepest fears and greatest desires into a cage of their own making. Long ago, before mortals walked the earth, Azeroth was ruled by the Black Empire. This was a chaotic civilization of shadow and madness, where the old gods ruled over armies of faceless monsters and elemental spirits. When the cosmic travelers known as the Titans arrived, they fought a massive war to save the young world soul sleeping inside the planet. The Titans realized they could not kill the old gods without destroying Azeroth itself, so they chose to lock them away. They built massive underground prisons, bound with heavy golden chains and protected by powerful magic. N'Zoth was sealed deep below the ocean floor, but unlike his brothers, who raged against their chains, N'Zoth embraced the quiet of the deep waters. He turned his prison into a palace of secrets, listening to the vibrations of the world above and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came 10,000 years ago, during an event that changed the face of Azeroth forever. At that time, the continent of Kalimdor was a single massive landmass. It was ruled by the Night Elves and their beautiful, incredibly proud ruler, Queen Azshara. Azshara and her loyal highborn sorcerers, the Highborn, became obsessed with the magic of the Well of Eternity, a lake of pure arcane energy at the center of the world. This obsession drew the attention of Sargeras, the leader of the demonic Burning Legion. Azshara, believing she was worthy of a dark god, tried to bring the demon army into Azeroth. Her plan failed when a small group of rebels fought back, causing the Well of Eternity to collapse in on itself. The explosion was so powerful that it tore the single continent apart, sending massive waves of water rushing to fill the empty space. This disaster is remembered as the Great Sundering, as the capital city of Xinasari crumbled into the ocean. Queen Azshara and her people were dragged into the cold, crushing depths. She used her powerful magic to hold back the water, creating a small bubble of air for herself and her remaining followers. But her arcane power was fading fast. As the magical shield began to crack, the cold sea threatened to swallow them all. In that moment of absolute terror, when even the proudest queen faced certain death, a voice echoed in her mind. It was not a loud, angry shout, but a soft, soothing whisper that rose from the darkness beneath her. The voice belonged to N'Zoth. The old god did not demand her absolute submission right away. He knew that Azshara's greatest weakness was her massive ego. Instead of treating her like a defeated servant, N'Zoth offered her a partnership. He promised to save her and her people from drowning, but they would have to take on a new form. They would become the rulers of a new empire, built in the dark corners of the ocean where no mortal could ever reach them. Realizing she had no other choice, and refusing to let her beauty and glory die in the dark, Azshara accepted the bargain. The magic of the void immediately washed over the drowning elves, twisting their bodies and minds. Their long legs fused together into powerful serpentine tails. Their smooth skin grew rough scales, and their fingers became webbed. Gills opened on their necks, allowing them to breathe the salty water. They became the Naga, a race of half-elf, half-serpent monsters born of dark magic. At the very bottom of the sea, right above the prison of their savior, they built a magnificent new capital city called Nazjatar. For 10,000 years, the Naga served as N'Zoth's eyes and ears in the physical world, preparing for the day their master would be freed from his chains. But N'Zoth's ambitions did not end at the ocean floor. While his Naga servants built their empire in the deep, the drowned god turned his gaze toward another world. This was not a planet in the stars, but a parallel dimension known as the Emerald Dream. Created by the Titans, the Emerald Dream is a perfect, untouched blueprint of Azeroth. It is a world of endless forests and wild rivers, showing what the planet would look like if mortal civilizations had never built cities or paved roads. It was meant to be a place of absolute peace, guarded by the green dragonflight and the druids who slept for centuries to walk its paths. N'Zoth saw the Emerald Dream as a major threat, but also as an incredible opportunity. If he could corrupt this pure dimension, he could spread his madness directly into the minds of the sleeping druids, and eventually into the physical world itself. The door to the dream had already been opened slightly by another old god, Yogg-Saron, who had corrupted the roots of a giant world tree in the frozen north. Although that tree had been destroyed, the pathway remained open. N'Zoth seized this path and began to pour his dark energy into the dream, turning parts of it into a red, twisted nightmare. To spread this corruption, N'Zoth needed a leader, someone who understood the minds of the Night Elves and possessed a deep hatred for the natural world. He found the perfect agent in Xavius. Xavius was once the chief advisor to Queen Azura, a brilliant but cruel sorcerer who had been turned into the very first satyr by the demons of the Burning Legion. After failing his demon masters, Xavius had been defeated and imprisoned inside a magical tree. But N'Zoth reached into the tree, pulled Xavius's soul from the wood, and gave him a new, terrible purpose. Xavius became the Nightmare Lord, the herald of N'Zoth inside the Emerald Dream. Under the direction of the old god, Xavius worked tirelessly to expand the Emerald Nightmare. The beautiful green forests of the dream began to rot, replaced by twisted trees with red leaves and pools of black, bubbling shadow. The peaceful spirits of nature were turned into aggressive, bloodthirsty monsters. Even the druids who entered the dream to heal the land found themselves trapped in a living nightmare, unable to wake up as their minds were slowly consumed by madness. The corruption grew so strong that it eventually reached Ysera, the green dragon aspect who had sworn to protect the dream. In a tragic turn of events, the noble dragon was corrupted by the nightmare, turning into a weapon of destruction before she could be stopped. For N'Zoth, the Emerald Nightmare was more than just a tool to destroy nature. It was a weapon of mass corruption. By infecting the dream, he could bypass the physical defenses of Azeroth. The minds of mortals are fragile, and when they sleep they are vulnerable. Through the nightmare, N'Zoth could whisper his dark thoughts into the dreams of kings, scholars, and warriors, driving them mad from within. He used these whispers to guide the Twilight's Hammer, a massive cult dedicated to bringing about the end of the world. He even reached into the mind of Neltharion, the great black dragon aspect, turning him into Deathwing the Destroyer, a monster of fire and rage who nearly tore the planet apart. What makes N'Zoth unique among the old gods is his ability to play the long game, While mortals fought against Cthulhu in the sands of Silithus, and against Yogg-Saron in the frozen peaks of Northrend, N'Zoth remained silent, hidden in the depths. He let the heroes of Azeroth exhaust themselves fighting other threats. Every war, every disaster, and every broken alliance played directly into his hands. He knew that the chains of his Titan prison were old, and that with every passing year, the magic holding him back was growing weaker. By the time mortals realized the true scale of the threat, N'Zoth's plans were already near completion. The Emerald Nightmare had weakened the barriers between worlds, and the Naga had gathered the ancient relics needed to break the final seals of his prison. From the deepest trenches of the ocean to the softest dreams of the sleeping world, the drowned god had woven a net of corruption that covered the entire planet. He proved that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who attacks with an army, but the one who waits in the dark, whispering secrets into the ears of those who think they are safe. Chapter 6: Proto-Dragons and the Fall of Galakrond. Long before the mortal empires rose to power, and before the Great Sundering shattered the world, Azeroth was a wild and primordial place. The Titans had ordered the chaotic elements and locked away the old gods deep beneath the earth. In this clean slate, life began to flourish. From the elemental energies that still warmed the young planet, a new kind of creature emerged. These were the Proto-Dragons. They were savage, powerful, and driven by raw instinct. They flew through the skies of ancient Kalimdor, claiming the high peaks and the deep valleys as their hunting grounds. Most of these creatures were little more than beasts, governed by hunger and the need to survive. Yet, among these primordial beasts, a spark of intelligence was beginning to grow. Some proto-dragons began to communicate. They developed a basic language, formed loose social groups, and learned to cooperate when hunting. They were divided by the colors of their scales, which reflected the different elemental environments they inhabited. There were red, blue, green, bronze, and black proto-dragons, each adapted to their own way of life. But even in this early age, there was one who stood far above all others. He was a giant among giants, a creature of such massive scale that his shadow could cover entire valleys. This was Galakrond. In the beginning, Galakrond was not a monster. He was the largest and strongest of the proto-dragons, respected and feared by all. He was the great hunter, and for a long time he lived in harmony with his kin. He was so massive that his wings beat like thunder, and his roar could shake the mountains. To the smaller proto-dragons, he was the undisputed master of the skies, a natural wonder of the young world, but such massive size required an equally massive amount of food. As the years passed, Galakrond's hunger grew. It became an endless, burning pit that could never be filled. Morten Benipindet that could never be filled. Mummel Medeta. We do not know exactly what caused the great change in Galakrond. Some ancient records suggest that the old gods, whispering from their deep prisons, reached into his mind. Others believe that the Titan Keepers themselves may have played a part through experiments that went terribly wrong. Whatever the cause, the giant proto-dragon began to change. He ceased hunting the beasts of the land and turned his sights on his own kind. Galakrond became a cannibal. This dark path of consumption quickly warped his body and his mind. The flesh of other proto-dragons carried a strange, corrupting energy when consumed in such vast quantities. As Galakrond devoured more and more of his kin, his size increased to impossible proportions. He grew larger than all 5 of the future dragon aspects combined. But this growth was not healthy. It was a grotesque, unnatural mutation. His body began to rot while he was still alive. Hideous, pale blue scales covered his skin, and many extra eyes began to open across his massive head and body. New limbs, useless and misshapen, sprouted from his chest and sides. His breath became a cloud of toxic decay. The most terrifying aspect of his mutation, however, was what happened to the dragons he devoured. The bodies of the proto-dragons that Galakrond swallowed did not simply digest. The dark energy within him animated their dead flesh. Galakrond would vomit these creatures back out as mindless, decaying monsters. They were the not-living, the first undead of Azeroth. These zombie-like drakes had no wills of their own. They flew in massive swarms, hunting down surviving proto-dragons to feed their master's endless appetite. The sky, once a symbol of freedom, became a grey canopy of dread. As the shadow of Galakrond grew, the proto-dragons faced total extinction. Many of them panicked, turning on each other in their terror. But a small group of drakes realized that they had to stand together if they wished to survive. These 5 proto-dragons possessed an intelligence and a courage that set them apart from the rest of their wild kin. There was Ahn'Qiraj, a red female whose heart was filled with deep compassion for her people. Her sister, Ysera, was green, small, and physically weak, but she possessed an incredible bravery that defied her size. Malygos, a blue male, was highly intelligent, capable of deep thought and clever tactics. His closest friend was Neltharion, a powerful black male whose strength and tough hide made him a natural protector. Finally, there was Nozdormu, a bronze male who was calm, patient, and highly strategic in his thinking. These 5 could see that the situation was hopeless if they fought alone. They began to organize the surviving proto-dragons, trying to form an army to resist the giant. But their efforts were nearly shattered by the sheer power of Galakrond and his undead swarms. During these dark days, their struggle caught the attention of someone who had been watching from the shadows. This was Tyr, one of the mighty Titan Keepers. Unlike his fellow keepers, who remained isolated in their grand temples, Tyr walked the lands of Azeroth. He saw the threat that Galakrond posed to the future of the world. He also saw the incredible potential in the 5 brave proto-dragons. Armed with his massive warhammer and a powerful artifact known as the Spark of Tyr, the Keeper decided to join the fight. Tyr met with the 5 proto-dragons and offered his help. Together, they planned a grand assault on the monster. The battle that followed was unlike anything the young world had ever seen. The sky was filled with lightning, fire, and the deafening roars of thousands of clashing dragons. Tyr fought with incredible strength, his hammer striking Galakrond with the force of falling stars. But Galakrond was too powerful. During a desperate moment in the battle, the giant lunged at Ysera, intending to swallow her whole. Tyr rushed forward to save the young green drake, swinging his hammer to distract the beast. Galakrond countered with a massive sweep of his wing, knocking the hammer from Tyr's grasp. As the Keeper reached for his fallen weapon, the giant bit down with his massive jaws. With a terrible crunch, Galakrond tore off Tyr's hand and swallowed it. The loss of the Keeper's hand was a devastating blow. Wounded and weakened, Tyr was forced to retreat, leaving the 5 proto-dragons to face the monster on their own. They knew that they could not defeat Galakrond through raw strength alone. They had to use their minds, their unique abilities, and above all, their unity. Malygos and Neltharion formulated a desperate plan. They realized that Galakrond's greatest strength, his massive size and his endless hunger, was also his greatest weakness. The 5 proto-dragons lured the giant into a narrow valley, surrounded by high, icy cliffs. Galakrond pursued them, his jaws snapping as he tried to devour them one by one. As the giant opened his mouth to strike, Malygos and Neltharion acted with perfect timing. Working together, they grabbed a massive boulder from the mountainside and threw it directly into Galakrond's throat. The boulder lodged deep in his gullet, blocking his airway. At the same time, Ahn'Qiraj, Ysera, and Nozdormu attacked his eyes and wings, distracting him and preventing him from dislodging the stone. Galakrond thrashed in agony, suffocating as he tried to breathe. He clawed at his own throat, his massive wings beating wild patterns into the sky. But the 5 drakes held their ground, refusing to let him escape. With a final, earth-shaking shudder, the giant progenitor of dragons collapsed. His massive body crashed into the frozen wastes of northern Kalimdor, splitting the land beneath him. The silence that followed was absolute. The great terror was dead. The undead swarms, no longer sustained by Galakrond's dark energy, crumbled into dust. The remaining Proto-Dragons gathered around the fallen giant, gazing in awe at the victory their 5 champions had achieved. When the other Titan Keepers saw what had happened, they were deeply moved. They realized that they had neglected their duty to protect the living creatures of Azeroth. They saw that these 5 Proto-Dragons had shown a nobility and a willingness to sacrifice that made them worthy of a grand destiny. With the help of Keeper Tyr, who survived his wounds and replaced his missing hand with one made of pure silver, the Keepers called upon the power of the Titans. They infused the 5 champions with cosmic energies. Ahn'Qiraj became the Lifebinder, Ysera became the Dreamer, Malygos became the Spellweaver, Neltharion became the Earth Warder, and Nozdormu became the Timeless One. Thus, the dragon aspects were born. From the ashes of the prehistoric struggle against Galakrond, a new era of order and protection began for Azeroth. The bones of the giant remained in the frozen north, a massive monument to the cost of greed and the power of unity. The region would eventually be known as the Dragon Blight, a sacred ground where dragons of all flights would go to die, forever watched over by the memory of their fallen progenitor. Chapter 7. The Charge of the Dragon Aspects. The shadow of Galakrond had finally fallen. The massive proto-dragon, whose hunger had threatened to consume all life on the young world of Azeroth, lay dead in the frozen wastes. His colossal bones remained as a silent warning of what happens when the wild forces of nature grow out of control. The lands were quiet once more, but the threat had revealed a dangerous truth. The Titan Keepers, who were built to protect the world, could not be everywhere at once. They needed guardians who belonged to the world itself. It was Keeper Tyr, the greatest warrior of the Titan Forged, who saw the true potential of the creatures that lived on Azeroth. During the desperate fight against Galakrond, 5 proto-dragons had stood by his side. They had shown courage, intelligence, and a willingness to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. Tyr believed these noble beasts deserved more than just thanks. He believed they should become the ultimate defenders of the planet. However, not all of the Keepers agreed with this plan. Odin, the Prime Designate, strongly opposed the idea. He was a proud and stubborn warrior who believed that only the Titan Forged, made of metal and stone, could be trusted with such a holy duty. To Odin, the dragons were still just wild beasts, descendants of elemental drakes, and therefore too unstable and mortal to carry the weight of the Titan's legacy. When the other Keepers refused to listen to his warnings, Odin took a dramatic step. He severed a large portion of the great fortress of Ulduar and lifted it high into the clouds, creating the Halls of Valor. There, he decided to build his own army of spirits, the Valajar, completely separate from the rest of the world. But his departure did not stop Tyr and the remaining Keepers from moving forward with their grand design. With Odin gone, the remaining Keepers worked together to contact the Pantheon, the great creators who ruled the cosmos. They asked the Titans to bless the 5 heroic proto-dragons with a portion of their own cosmic power. The Pantheon agreed, seeing the wisdom in having native guardians to watch over the world's soul sleeping deep within Azeroth. Because the Titans could not easily step onto the planet without causing massive damage, they channeled their great powers through the Keepers. The first to receive this blessing was Nozdormu, a massive and patient bronze proto-dragon. Aman'Thul, the High Father of the Pantheon, chose him to be the Master of Time. Through Keeper Re, Aman'Thul bestowed a portion of his cosmic power upon Nozdormu, transforming him into the Timeless One. His scales turned to a brilliant, shimmering bronze, reflecting the golden sands of countless hours. Nozdormu was given a duty unlike any other. He was charged with guarding the pathways of time itself, ensuring that history flowed in its proper direction. The High Father granted Nozdormu the ability to see the past, the present, and the future all at once. This gift came with a heavy burden. Nozdormu was shown the exact moment of his own death, a reminder that even the Master of Time must eventually submit to the natural order. Along with his bronze dragonflight, Nozdormu established his home in the caverns of time. watching over the delicate threads of destiny. Next came Alexstrasza, a red proto-dragon of incredible compassion and strength. Ahn'Qiraj, the Titan patron of all life, chose her to be the guardian of every living thing on Azeroth. Through Keeper Freya, Ahn'Qiraj poured her boundless energy into Alexstrasza, transforming her into the Lifebinder. Her scales became a vibrant, glowing red, and her breath was filled with the power to heal and bring forth new growth. Because of her deep wisdom and her endless love for all living creatures, Alexstrasza was crowned the Dragon Queen. She was given authority over all other dragons, serving as their leader and guide. Her red dragonflight became the protectors of life, ready to defend the innocent and nurture the world. They believed that life was a precious gift, one that must be preserved at all costs. Ahn'Qiraj also chose to bless Alexstrasza's younger sister, the slender and quiet green proto-dragon named Ysera. While Alexstrasza was charged with protecting physical life in the waking world, Ysera was given a different task. Ahn'Qiraj blessed her with the power of nature's deep influence, binding her spirit to the Emerald Dream. This was a vast, untouched realm of spirit and nature that served as the blueprint for Azeroth before civilization changed it. As the blessing took hold, Ysera's scales turned a deep, lush green, and she fell into an eternal trance. Known as the Dreamer, she rarely opened her eyes in the physical world. Instead, she wandered the green forests of the Emerald Dream, watching over the growing wilds of Azeroth from her spiritual sanctuary. Her green dragonflight walked between both worlds, keeping the balance of nature and protecting the dream from any dark forces that might try to corrupt it. The Titan Norgannon, the master of magic and keeper of secrets, looked upon the blue proto-dragon Malygos. Malygos was known for his sharp mind and his mischievous nature, but he also possessed a deep understanding of the world's hidden forces. Through Keeper Loken, Norgannon granted Malygos a portion of his supreme magical power, transforming him into the Spellweaver. Malygos's scales shifted to an icy, brilliant blue, crackling with raw arcane energy. He was charged with safeguarding the ley lines, the invisible rivers of magic that flowed across the surface of Azeroth. His duty was to ensure that magic was used responsibly and did not tear the world apart. The blue dragonflight became scholars and spellcasters, mapping the ley lines and keeping watch over the deep secrets of the arcane. For a long time, Malygos was the happiest of the aspects, celebrating the wonderful beauty of the magic he guarded. Finally, Khaz'goroth, the Titan shaper and forger of worlds, chose the mighty black proto-dragon Neltharion. Neltharion was a creature of immense physical strength and quiet dignity. Through Keeper Arcadus, Khaz'goroth bestowed his vast power upon Neltharion, naming him the Earth Warder. Neltharion's scales became as dark as coal and as hard as iron plate. He was given dominion over the earth, the deep mountains, and the molten rock beneath the surface. His duty was to sculpt the land, support the weight of the continents, and protect the world from the dangers that slept in the deep dark places. The black dragonflight worked tirelessly to shape the mountains and valleys, ensuring the earth remained stable and strong. Neltharion was a close friend to Malygos, and for many years he was a pillar of strength for all the aspects. With their new powers, the 5 proto-dragons had evolved into the majestic entities known as the Dragon Aspects. Their bodies had grown larger, more elegant, and filled with cosmic energy. Their children, the 5 dragonflights, shared their colors and their sacred duties, forming a grand alliance that would watch over the world for thousands of years. In the early days of their charge, the aspects worked in perfect harmony. They established their primary home in the northern reaches of Kalimdor, a beautiful sanctuary known as the Dragon Isles. Here, they built great temples and places of learning, where the different flights could gather, share their knowledge, and rest from their long journeys across the globe. Each flight had its own specific duties, but they always stood together when a great threat appeared. Together, they helped the wild gods and the Titan-forged shape the young world into a place of peace and beauty. They watched over the mortal races as they began to emerge, ensuring they could grow without being destroyed by the chaotic forces of the universe. For many centuries, the system worked perfectly. The Bronze Flight patrolled the timeways, stopping any anomalies before they could change history. The Red Flight brought warmth and healing to lands scarred by ancient battles. The Green Flight maintained the flow of life and nature, keeping the seasons in balance. The Blue Flight managed the magic of the world, keeping it safe from those who would abuse it. And the Black Flight stood as the heavy shield of the earth, holding back the terrors of the deep. It was a golden age for Azeroth, a time when the world felt safe under the wings of its giant protectors. The dragons were loved and respected by all who knew of them. They were the perfect bridge between the cosmic order of the Titans and the natural wildlife of the planet. Yet, even in this peaceful age, the seeds of future tragedy were already being planted. Deep beneath the earth, in the dark places that Neltharion was sworn to protect, ancient whispers were waiting. The old gods, though imprisoned by the Titans long ago, were not dead. They watched the new guardians of the world, looking for a weakness they could exploit. And in the quiet dark, they found the one aspect who stood closest to them, beginning a slow and silent corruption that would one day threaten to tear the world apart. But for now, the sky belonged to the dragons, and the charge of the aspects remained the strongest shield Azeroth had ever known. Chapter 8. Neltharion's Descent into Deathwing. Before he became the symbol of doom, he was Neltharion, the Earth Warder. He was one of the 5 great aspects, chosen by the Titans to watch over the young world of Azeroth. While other dragons received power over time, life, nature and magic, Neltharion received the blessing of the Titan smith, Khaz'goroth. This gift granted him dominion over the earth and the deep hidden places of the world. He was a majestic, noble creature, with scales as dark as charcoal and eyes that burned with the warm, steady light of the planet's core. His role was to shape the mountains, carve the deep valleys, and ensure the bedrock of Azeroth remained stable and safe. For a long time, Neltharion was a symbol of strength and wisdom. He was the rock upon which the other dragonflights could always depend, and his closest friend was Malygos, the aspect of magic. Yet, the very gift that made Neltharion so powerful was also his greatest weakness. To guard the earth, Neltharion had to connect his mind and spirit to the planet itself. He could feel every shift of the tectonic plates, every flow of molten rock, and every tremor in the deep crust. But Azeroth was not empty. Deep beneath the surface, imprisoned in massive Titan-forged vaults, lay the old gods. These ancient chaotic entities of the void had once ruled the world, and even in their imprisonment they sought to regain control. Because Neltharion's mind was constantly tuned to the deep places of the earth, he was the closest to their prisons. He was the only aspect who had to listen to the silent, dark layers of the world every single day. Slowly, the old gods realized they had an open door into the mind of Azeroth's strongest protector. The corruption did not happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing process that took thousands of years to complete. It began with whispers. At first, these whispers did not sound like outside voices. They did not sound like monsters speaking from the dark. Instead, they sounded like Neltharion's own thoughts. They played on his secret feelings of exhaustion and bitterness. Although Neltharion was immensely strong, the weight of the entire world constantly pressed down upon his mind and body. He felt as if he was suffocating under the heavy load of his duty, carrying a burden that none of the other aspects could truly understand. The whispers agreed with him. They told him that the Titans had simply used him as a tool, leaving him to suffer while the other aspects enjoyed the beautiful sky, the green forests, and the flow of magic. Deep within the earth, Neltharion also built secret laboratories, such as the shadowed crucible known as Aberrus. In these dark, hidden places, away from the eyes of his fellow aspects, he began to experiment with the powers of the void. He sought to find a way to escape his burden, to create a force that could stand against any threat, and to make himself truly invincible. The old gods watched his experiments with great satisfaction. They knew that the more he sought power to protect his charge, the more he would rely on the dark energies they offered him. As the centuries passed, the whispers grew louder and more convincing. They fed Neltharion's growing paranoia. The old gods whispered that his fellow aspects were jealous of his strength. They told him that Alexstrasza, Ysera, Malygos, and Nosdormu were secretly plotting to steal his power and divide his kingdom. He began to look at his closest friends with suspicion and anger. He also grew to despise the mortal races, such as the Night Elves, who were beginning to spread across the world. The voices told him that these mortals were like insects, ruining the beautiful earth he had worked so hard to shape. Neltharion came to believe that the only way to find peace from his crushing burden was to destroy his enemies, claim total control over the other dragonflights, and rule Azeroth as its sole master. The perfect opportunity for his betrayal arrived with the War of the Ancients. During this massive conflict, the demonic Burning Legion invaded Azeroth through the Well of Eternity. The world was in desperate danger, and the dragonflights knew they had to act to save their home. Seizing this moment, the old gods gave Neltharion a dark plan. They convinced him to create a powerful weapon, an artifact of unimaginable strength that could supposedly wipe out the demonic invaders in a single blow. Neltharion presented this idea to the other dragon aspects. He argued that the threat of the Burning Legion was too great for their physical bodies to handle alone. He proposed that they should all sacrifice a portion of their sacred power to create a golden disc, which he called the Dragon Soul. Because the other aspects trusted Neltharion completely, they agreed to his plan. They did not know that their trusted brother was already completely insane, his mind entirely controlled by the ancient evils lurking in the deep. To create the physical disc, Neltharion used his own blood, mixing it with raw magic and forging it in the deep, volcanic caverns beneath the earth. He was aided by his goblin servants, who used secret, dark methods to shape the gold. Crucially, the old gods helped him place a powerful spell of concealment over the artifact. This dark magic hid the true nature of the dragon soul, ensuring that the other aspects could not sense the corruption and malice growing inside it. When the aspects gathered to empower the artifact, they each poured a massive amount of their own divine essence into the disc. Alexstrasza gave her life energy, Malygos gave his arcane magic, Ysera gave her connection to nature, and Nosdormu gave his control over time. But Neltharion did not put any of his own power into the dragon soul. Instead, he kept his full strength intact. By the time the ritual was complete, the simple golden disc held a vast portion of the collective power of the red, blue, green, and bronze dragonflights. It was now the most dangerous weapon in existence, capable of commanding or destroying any dragon who had contributed to its creation. The moment of betrayal came during a massive battle against the Burning Legion. The dragonflights had flown to the front lines, ready to unleash their new weapon against the demons. Neltharion took the dragon soul into the air, holding it high above the battlefield. With a roar of triumph, he activated the artifact. The power that burst from the disc was terrifying. It did indeed vaporize thousands of demons in an instant. But Neltharion did not stop there. He turned the destructive energy of the dragon soul against the Night Elves, and then, shocking everyone, he turned it against the other dragonflights. The blue dragonflight, led by Neltharion's best friend Malygos, flew forward to stop him, refusing to believe that their brother had betrayed them. But the power of the dragon soul was absolute. With a single devastating blast of magic, Neltharion wiped out almost the entire blue dragonflight in a matter of seconds. Malygos watched in horror as his children fell from the sky, their bodies torn apart by the very weapon they had helped create. This tragedy drove Malygos into a deep, centuries-long depression and madness from which he would never truly recover. The other dragonflights were forced to scatter and flee, leaving Neltharion victorious but utterly alone in his dark triumph. However, the victory came at a terrible physical cost. The immense chaotic power of the dragon soul, combined with the raw dark energy of the old gods, was simply too much for a physical shell to contain. As Neltharion held the artifact, the dark forces began to warp and tear at his physical body. His beautiful dark scales began to split apart. His flesh cracked open like the earth during an earthquake, revealing his molten, glowing heart. Magma and boiling fire began to flow from his chest, burning away his majestic appearance and replacing it with a monstrous, demonic form. His eyes, once warm and steady, now blazed with a terrifying, blood-red light. Neltharion was no longer the noble Earth Warder. He had become Deathwing the Destroyer, a creature of pure malice, pain and fire. His body was literally falling apart, his skin unable to hold the massive amount of volcanic energy swelling inside him. The very power he had sought to claim was now threatening to rip him to pieces. To survive, Deathwing retreated to his deep underground lairs. There, his goblin servants worked feverishly to save their master. They forged heavy plates of elementium and adamantium, bolting them directly into his torn flesh and cracked bones to hold him together. These metallic plates acted as an artificial shell, keeping his burning heart from exploding and allowing him to continue his crusade of destruction. This painful transformation completed his descent into darkness. The noble protector who had once loved the earth and guarded its secrets had been entirely consumed by the whispers of the void. He was now a prisoner of his own madness, a weapon of the old gods, destined to bring about the end of the world. The story of Neltharion's fall is a tragic reminder of the terrifying power of the old gods' whispers. They did not need armies to defeat the strongest of the dragon aspects. They only needed to find the quiet, hidden doubts in his heart and turn them into a fire that would burn the world. Chapter 9. The Wild Gods and the Emerald Dream. Long ago, when the world of Azeroth was young, the Colossal Titans arrived to bring order to a chaotic universe. They fought the ancient elementals and locked them away in separate realms, leaving the surface of the planet quiet and still. With the land finally at peace, the Titans turned their attention to nurturing the young world soul sleeping deep inside the earth. To protect and shape this fragile world, the Titan Ahn'Qiraj, the patron of all life, bestowed her immense power upon a chosen servant. This was the Titan Watcher Freya, a keeper of nature, growth, and the wild. Freya wandered across the silent continents of Azeroth, looking for places where the life energy of the planet was strongest. She created special enclaves of life, rich gardens where nature could grow without any limits. In these sacred places, like the Sholazar Basin, Ahn'Qiraj Crater, and the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, Freya experimented with different plants and creatures. She wanted to fill the empty world with a beautiful variety of living things. To help her guide this growing nature, she tapped into a deep, magical dimension that existed alongside the physical world. This realm became known as the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream is a strange and beautiful place. It is a flawless blueprint of Azeroth, showing what the planet would look like if no mortal races had ever built cities, paved roads, or cut down the ancient forests. Some say Freya created the dream out of nothing. Others believe the dream was already there, born from the thoughts and dreams of the sleeping world soul, and that Freya simply shaped it into a structured realm. In the dream, there is no winter and there is no decay. It is a land of eternal spring and summer, where the trees are always green, the rivers run clear, and the air is filled with the scent of wild flowers. As Freya cultivated the natural world, the magic of Azeroth began to gather in the greatest animals of the land. These beasts grew incredibly large, strong, and highly intelligent. They were not just ordinary animals. They became the physical representations of nature itself. They were the wild gods, the primal animal demigods of Azeroth. Each of these magnificent creatures represented a different aspect of the wild, embodying the emotions, strengths, and survival instincts of the animal kingdom. Aminu came Thintadumst. Among the first of these wild gods was Malorn, the majestic white stag. Malorn was a creature of pure grace and nobility, running through the ancient forests with a quiet dignity. He was deeply connected to the land, but his eyes always looked toward the heavens. Legend says that the moon goddess, Elune, fell in love with his beauty. Malorn became a symbol of the peaceful majesty of nature, a protector of the deep woods who guided those lost in the dark. In the cold northern forests, the twin bear brothers, Ursok and Ursol, made their home. Ursok was a giant of incredible physical strength, a mighty defender who used his massive claws to protect his followers, the Furbolg. His brother Ursol was a master of natural magic and a carver of ancient ruins. Together, the Bear Brothers represented the balance between physical power and spiritual wisdom. They taught their children to respect the earth, to hunt only what they needed, and to stand strong against any threat. In the open plains and dark forests, the great wolf Goldrin hunted. Goldrin, also known as Logosh, was the spirit of ferocity and the hunter. He refused to bow to anyone, not even the titans or the demigods. His heart was filled with a wild, uncontrollable rage, but he also possessed a deep sense of honor. Goldrin represented the raw, untamed power of the predator, the necessity of the hunt, and the fierce loyalty of the pack. His spirit was so strong that centuries later, his power would give birth to the Worgen, a race of wolf-like warriors. Above the canopy of the world, Aviana, the mistress of birds, ruled the skies. She was a beautiful, winged demigod who could speak to all feathered creatures of the world. Her spirit was connected to G'Hanir, the mother tree, a colossal tree that stood high in the spiritual heavens of the Emerald Dream. G'Hanir was a sanctuary for all winged beings, a place where their spirits could fly freely after death. Aviana was the eyes and ears of the wild, soaring high above the clouds to watch over the land and carry messages across the continents. Deep in the swampy lands and muddy fields, Agamagan, the great boar, roamed. He was a colossal beast with skin as hard as stone and sharp tusks that could plow through mountains. Agamagan represented resilience, endurance, and the unstoppable force of life. He did not care for grace or magic. He relied on his sheer willpower to survive in the harshest conditions. Wherever he walked, his blood fertilized the soil, allowing new plants to grow in his footsteps. There were many other wild gods, such as Tortola, the wise and ancient turtle who represented patience and the steady, slow endurance of the earth. There was Aecina, a mysterious spirit of the deep wilderness, who cared for the delicate web of life and death, ensuring that every small insect and flower had its place in the grand design. The most famous of all the nature spirits was Cenarius, the demigod of the grove. Cenarius was the son of Malorn and the moon goddess Elune. He had the lower body of a magnificent stag and the upper body of a night elf, with great wooden antlers growing from his head. Cenarius was taught the secrets of the wild by his father and the magic of the stars by his mother. He became the bridge between the mortal world, the stars, and the Emerald Dream. Cenarius would eventually teach the night elves the secrets of druidism, showing them how to commune with nature and protect the balance of the world. To ensure that these powerful entities would forever protect Azeroth, Keeper Freya bound their spirits to the Emerald Dream. She created a magical covenant, linking their life forces directly to the dream plane. This meant that the wild gods became creatures of two different worlds. They could walk upon the physical earth, eating, sleeping, and fighting like normal beasts, but their souls remained anchored to the timeless energy of the dream. This connection granted the wild gods a unique and powerful form of immortality. Unlike ordinary mortals, whose souls pass on to the mysterious realms of death when they die, a wild god's soul cannot be easily destroyed. When a wild god is slain in the physical world, their spirit does not vanish. Instead, their soul is pulled back into the great cycle of nature. The journey of a fallen wild god is a beautiful but long process of healing. When their physical shell dies, their spirit travels through the pathways of the Emerald Dream and down into the Ardenweald, a wondrous forest realm located in the Shadowlands. Ardenweald is the dark, wintry counterpart to the bright summer of the Emerald Dream. While the dream represents growth, life, and spring, Ahn'Qiraj represents the quiet rest of autumn and winter. It is a place of slumber and recovery. In the groves of Ahn'Qiraj, the spirits of the wild gods are placed inside large glowing pods called wild seeds. These wild seeds are nurtured by the local spirits, the Night Fae, and the mysterious Winter Queen. The wild seeds are fed with anima, the raw essence of life and soul energy. Inside these pods, the broken spirits of the wild gods slowly heal, remembering who they are and gathering the strength they lost in their physical deaths. Once the spirit is fully healed and brimming with natural energy, it is ready to be reborn. The wild god leaves Ahn'Qiraj, returning first to the Emerald Dream. From the dream, they can once again project their spirits into the physical world, slowly growing a new physical body, or finding a way to manifest themselves to those who call upon them. This eternal loop of life, death, rest, and rebirth ensures that the wild forces of Azeroth can never truly be extinguished. This eternal cycle was put to its greatest test during the War of the Ancients, thousands of years ago. When the demonic Burning Legion invaded Azeroth, the Night Elves were desperate for help. Cenarius called upon the wild gods to join the battle. From the peaks of Mount Hyjal, the great animal demigods descended to defend their home. They fought with a fury that terrified the demons. Goldrin tore through legions of fell guards, Ursok and Ursul crushed entire armies under their massive paws, and Aviana filled the skies with storms of feathers and sharp claws. But the demons were endless, and many of the wild gods fell in battle. Malorn was killed by the demon lord Archimond, Ursok was overwhelmed by a sea of monsters, and Agamaggan sacrificed himself to buy time for his allies. It was a time of immense grief for Azeroth. The forests wept, and the Emerald Dream grew quiet as the spirits of these great defenders returned to the dream plane, broken and bleeding. Yet, because of Freya's ancient design, this tragedy was not the end. The sacrifices of the wild gods saved the world, and though they were gone from the physical land, their spirits slept peacefully in the wild seeds of Ahn'Qiraj and the quiet corners of the dream. Over the millennia, as the world slowly healed, the wild gods began to wake up once more. During times of great crisis, such as the Cataclysm, the mortal races witnessed the return of these ancient guardians. Ursok, Goldrin, Aviana, and Cenarius returned to the physical world, answering the call of the Druids to defend Mount Hyjal once again. The wild gods teach us that nature is not weak or fragile. It is a powerful, self-cleaning force that will always find a way to return. Just as winter must always give way to spring, the deaths of the wild gods are only a temporary sleep before a glorious awakening. Through the wisdom of Keeper Freya and the magic of the Emerald Dream, these primal protectors remain an eternal shield for Azeroth, ensuring that the green world will always endure. Chapter 10. The Colossal Beasts of Draenor and Azeroth. In the study of the cosmos, few subjects are as fascinating as the colossal beasts that once claimed dominion over the young worlds of the great dark beyond. To understand the history of Azeroth and Draenor, we must look beyond the mortal races and examine the primeval megafauna that walked the earth and swam the seas long before the first cities were built. These massive entities were not merely large animals, they were physical manifestations of the raw cosmic forces that shaped their respective planets. By comparing the giant creatures of Draenor with those of Azeroth, we can see how different environmental conditions and cosmic influences created two very different paths of evolution. To understand the giant beasts of Draenor, we must first look at the unique nature of that world. Unlike Azeroth, Draenor did not possess a slumbering Titan world soul in its core, because there was no world soul to absorb the element of spirit. This life-giving energy flowed freely through the soil. This abundance of spirit caused the planet's plant life to grow at an unnatural and aggressive rate. Giant carnivorous plant structures known as spore mounds grew to the size of mountains, spreading across the landscape and absorbing everything in their path. The plant life threatened to consume the entire world, leaving no room for other forms of life to develop. This runaway growth caught the attention of the Titan Agramar during his journeys through the cosmos. Recognizing that the plant life would eventually destroy the planet's balance, Ahn'Qiraj decided to intervene. He did not fight the plants directly. Instead, he gathered the elemental energies of Draenor and forged a colossal giant made of stone and magma. This giant was named Grond. Grond was a mountain of living stone, created for the sole purpose of smashing the spore mounds and restoring balance to the world. The clash between Grond and the plant giants altered the very geography of Draenor, tearing open valleys and pushing up new mountain ranges. As Grond battled the massive spore mounds, the sheer violence of the conflict caused pieces of his stone body to chip off and fall to the earth. These fallen fragments did not remain lifeless rock. Infused with the leftover elemental energies of their creator, they rose as a new generation of giants known as the Colossals. The Colossals were smaller than Grond, but they were still massive enough to reshape the land. They continued Grond's mission, waging a relentless war against the suffocating plants. Through their battles, the Colossals further broke down, shedding smaller pieces of themselves that would eventually evolve into the diverse stone-born species of Draenor. The direct descendants of these Colossals were the Magnaron. The Magnaron were immense giants made of molten stone, magma, and ice. They did not possess the high intelligence of the Titans, but they had a deep, instinctual connection to the earth and volcanic activity. Their bodies were a transition state between pure elemental stone and living flesh. As they aged, their outer skins would slowly harden into cold, solid rock. To survive, they sought out active volcanoes and areas of high geothermal heat to keep their magma blood flowing. The Magnaron represents a unique evolutionary path, where elemental power is bound to a physical, biological form. While the stone giants fought for the earth, the Sporomounds produced their own champions to defend the green wilds. These were the Genosaurs, massive, plant-like demigods that ruled over the collective of plant creatures known as the Primals. The Genosaurs were towering beasts made of thick wood, vines and leaves, walking on multiple legs and possessing incredible regenerative powers. They could channel the raw energy of nature to rapidly grow forests and control wild beasts. The eternal struggle between the stone-born Magnaron and the plant-born Genosaurs shaped the ecology of Draenor, keeping the world in a state of violent equilibrium. When we turn our gaze to Azeroth, we see a very different picture. Azeroth did possess a powerful world soul at its core. This world soul absorbed most of the planet's spirit energy, which left the native elementals without a calming influence. This resulted in chaotic elemental wars that raged across the surface for ages. When the Titan Pantheon arrived to order Azeroth, they banished the chaotic elementals to another plane of existence. With the elementals gone, and the Well of Eternity spreading arcane energy across the land, the wildlife of Azeroth evolved in a much more fluid and diverse environment, free from the rigid stone versus plant conflict of Draenor. Among the most terrifying of Azeroth's native giants are the Krakens, the massive leviathans of the deep seas. Unlike the land-dwelling giants, the origins of the Krakens are shrouded in mystery. Some scholars believe they are ancient elemental spirits of water that somehow avoided banishment, while others suggest they were biological sea beasts mutated by the chaotic energies of the old gods. The Krakens are massive, squid-like monsters with dozens of powerful tentacles capable of crushing the hulls of the largest ships. They dwell in the darkest depths of the ocean, occasionally rising to the surface to terrorize coastal settlements and sailor fleets. The physiology of a kraken is perfectly adapted to the crushing pressures of the deep ocean. Their skin is thick and leathery, resistant to both physical attacks and the extreme cold of the abyss. Some legendary krakens, such as Ozumat or Vikgoth, possess a strange, dark magic that allows them to corrupt the waters around them and control lesser sea creatures. Despite their immense power, krakens have clear weaknesses. They are highly sensitive to sudden changes in water temperature, and powerful frost magic can slow their movements or freeze their tentacles. Furthermore, their large eyes, while perfect for seeing in the dark ocean, are highly vulnerable to bright light and direct physical attacks. On the land of Azeroth, another group of colossal beasts emerged from the elemental past, the Proto-Dragons. Before the majestic dragon aspects were uplifted by the Titans, the skies of Azeroth were ruled by these savage, heavy-bodied predators. Proto-Dragons evolved from elemental drakes that chose to remain on Azeroth and slowly transitioned into creatures of flesh and bone. They retained many of their elemental traits, with different breeds possessing the ability to breathe fire, frost, or acid. They were not highly intelligent, but they possessed a brutal cunning and unmatched physical strength, making them the apex predators of the prehistoric world. Azeroth also features the mountain giants, colossal beings of animated stone and clay. At first glance, they might seem similar to the Magnaron of Draenor, but their origins are entirely different. While the Magnaron evolved naturally from the broken fragments of Grond, the mountain giants of Azeroth were directly created by the Titan Keepers to help shape and protect the physical landscape of the world. Over the millennia, many of these giants became wild, wandering into the deep forests and high mountain peaks. They are gentle by nature, preferring to sleep for centuries as moss and trees grow on their backs. But they will defend their territories with crushing force if disturbed. When we compare the megafauna of these two worlds, we see a clear contrast in evolutionary design. Draenor's giant beasts are defined by a strict binary division. On one side are the Breakers, born of stone and magma, who represent structure, order, and the preservation of the earth. On the other side are the Primals, born of wood and vine, who represent growth, chaos, and the relentless spread of life. Every giant creature on Draenor can trace its lineage back to this fundamental conflict. There is very little room for mutation or adaptation outside of these two opposing forces. Azeroth's megafauna, on the other hand, is defined by diversity and adaptability. Because the elements were sealed away and the planet was ordered by the Titans, life on Azeroth was free to experiment. Creatures like the Krakens and the Proto-Dragons adapted to their specific environments, utilizing elemental remnants in creative ways. Azeroth's giants are not locked in an eternal, planet-wide war against each other. Instead, they exist as part of a complex and varied ecosystem, filling specific niches in the mountains, the skies, and the deepest trenches of the ocean. In conclusion, the colossal beasts of Draenor and Azeroth show us how cosmic forces write their stories on the surface of planets. On Draenor, the skeletal remains of the Colossals still form the ridges and valleys of the land, a silent testament to a war of stone and plant that nearly consumed a world. On Azeroth, the giants of the land and sea continue to play their roles in the natural order, reminders of a wild and ancient past that refused to be tamed. Both worlds, though separated by the vastness of the cosmos, share a history built on the shoulders of giants. Chapter 11. The Dragon Isles and the Primal Incarnates. Long before the continents of Azeroth were shattered into the world we know today, there existed a single, massive landmass surrounded by wild, churning seas. In this ancient era, the world was a primordial cradle of raw energy. It was a time when the elements themselves ruled the earth, and the sky belonged to the wild Proto-Dragons. These creatures were not the elegant, highly intelligent beings of modern history. They were fierce, heavily armored predators of scale and tooth, born directly from the elemental storms that had once raged across the young planet. But this wild freedom was destined to change. The Titans, cosmic beings of order, arrived to reshape Azeroth. They sought to tame the chaotic elements and lock them away in prison planes. To secure their work, the Titan Keeper named Tyr looked upon the Proto-Dragons and saw potential. After 5 heroic Proto-Dragons helped Tyr defeat the giant, mutated monster Galakrond, the Titans decided to elevate them. Through a grand ritual, these 5 were infused with the cosmic magic of order, transforming them into the majestic dragon aspects. Alexstrasza, Malygos, Neltharion, Nosdormu, and Ysera were granted great power, immortality, and a sacred charge to protect the world. Yet, this transformation was not celebrated by all of dragonkind. To many proto-dragons, this divine gift was not a blessing, but a deep betrayal of their nature. They looked at the newly transformed aspects and did not see saviors. They saw mutated beasts who had traded their natural heritage for the cold, artificial magic of alien creators. They believed that Azeroth belonged to the wild, and that the Titans were invaders trying to paint over the natural beauty of their world with the rigid structures of order. This deep ideological division split the dragon species in two. On one side stood the newly formed dragonflights, who embraced the Titans and built grand cities like Valdrekan. On the other side stood the Primalists, those proto-dragons who refused to bow to the Keepers. They retreated to the wild corners of the world, determined to remain as nature had made them. As the centuries passed, the tension between these two factions grew, turning the pristine landscapes of the Dragon Isles into a silent powder keg waiting for a spark. To match the incredible power of the aspect-led dragonflights, 4 exceptionally powerful proto-dragons took a drastic step. They underwent ancient rituals to infuse their very bodies with the raw, concentrated elements of Azeroth. They became the Primal Incarnates, giant demigods of elemental fury who wielded power that rivaled the aspects themselves. The youngest and most volatile of these 4 was Raszageth. Known as the Storm Eater, she was a tempest given form, her scales crackling with blue lightning, and her wings capable of summoning hurricanes that could rip mountains apart. Raszageth possessed a fierce, uncompromising hatred for the Titans and their creations. She was driven by an explosive temper, always the first to advocate for open war against the aspects. In contrast to Raszageth's wild storms stood Iridikron, the Stone-Scaled. Imbued with the absolute power of the earth, Iridikron was a colossal beast of jagged stone and impenetrable armor. He was the master strategist of the Incarnates, possessed of a cold, calculating mind that valued patience and victory above all else. While the others fought with passion, Iridikron fought with logic, analyzing his enemies for any sign of weakness. Firuk the Blazing was the incarnation of fire. He was a cousin to Alexstrasza from the days before her transformation, but any family bond had long since burned away. Firuk was a creature of pure destruction, wrapped in a shroud of white-hot flame. He took joy in the chaos of battle, his laughter echoing over the roar of forest fires and melting stone. The most tragic figure among the Incarnates was Vyranoth, the Frozen Heart. She was a master of ice and frost, her presence alone freezing the air and bringing a quiet, deadly winter to the battlefield. Long ago, before the Grand Split, Vyranoth and Alexstrasza had been as close as sisters. They shared a deep, mutual love for their kind, and spent centuries trying to find a way for ordered and primal dragons to live in peace. Vyranoth did not wish for war, and for a long time she refused to join her siblings in their crusade. The fragile peace between the two sides finally shattered over the treatment of the youngest generation of dragons. The dragon aspects, wanting to ensure a peaceful future, began using Titan-infused waters to bath proto-dragon eggs. This process forced the unborn hatchlings to grow into ordered dragons rather than their natural primal forms. When Vyranoth discovered this, she felt a profound sense of betrayal. To her, the aspects were stealing the future of her people, forcing innocent hatchlings into a life of servitude to alien masters. Grief-stricken and angry, Vyranoth finally accepted the elemental ritual of frost, joining her siblings as an incarnate and sealing the fate of the world. The war that followed is recorded in history as the War of the Scaleborn. It was a conflict of unimaginable scale and brutality, shaking the very foundations of Azeroth. The skies above the Dragon Isles became a nightmare of fire, lightning, frost, and arcane magic, as brother fought brother and sister fought sister. The first major blow was struck by Raszageth. In a surprise attack, the Storm Eater led a massive force of Primalists to the Forbidden Reach, an isolated island chain where Neltharion, the Earth aspect, had secretly created an army of elite soldiers called the Drakthir. Razageth's fury was unmatched. She tore through Neltharion's defences and shattered the Oathbinder, a powerful Titan relic that Neltharion used to control his new creations. Left with no other choice to defeat the Storm Giant, a desperate Neltharion did something that would haunt him forever. He gave in to the dark, whispering voices of the old gods buried deep within the earth, using their corrupt magic to seal Razageth away inside a massive prison called the Froststone Vault. Though Razageth was imprisoned, the war only intensified. The remaining 3 Incarnates, led by the brilliant Iridikron, pushed the dragon aspects to their limits. The Primalists formed desperate alliances with other native enemies of the dragons, including the giant, lava-dwelling half-giants known as the Jaredin. Despite their elemental might, the Primal Incarnates could not match the organized discipline of the Dragonflights and the advanced technology of the Titan Keepers. One by one, the Incarnates began to fall. Firak's reckless anger led him into traps, and Viranoth's defensive frost could not hold against the combined might of the red, green and blue Dragonflights. Even in the face of defeat, Iridikron remained a deadly threat. Realizing that the war was lost, the Stone-Scaled made dark, secret bargains with entities far older and more dangerous than the Titans, hoping to secure a weapon that could one day cleanse Azeroth of the Order magic. In the final days of the war, the dragon aspects emerged victorious. Alexstrasza, carrying a heavy heart filled with the memories of her lost friendship with Viranoth, could not bring herself to execute her former kin. Instead, she decided to show mercy, though it was a cruel mercy. The aspects constructed a massive, heavily fortified prison known as the Vault of the Incarnates. Deep within this vault, located in the rugged mountains of the Dragon Isles, the remaining 3 Primal Incarnates were bound in eternal slumber, sealed by the combined elemental and arcane powers of the 5 Dragonflights. With their leaders imprisoned, the remaining Primalist forces were scattered and hunted down, their rebellion silenced. To ensure that the Incarnates would never be freed, the Dragon Aspects decided to lock away the Dragon Isles entirely. They deactivated the Great Beacon of Tyrhold, causing a thick, magical mist to roll in from the seas, hiding their ancestral home from the rest of Azeroth for 10,000 years. The dragons departed for other lands, leaving behind a silent continent of empty towers, sleeping giants, and forgotten histories. Yet, as the centuries rolled on, the memory of the Primal Incarnates did not fade. Beneath the stone, ice, and fire of their prisons, the elemental demigods waited, their hatred for the Titans and the Aspects burning as hot as the day they were sealed. They knew that no prison could last forever, and that one day the mists of the Dragon Isles would fade, and the ancient war for the soul of Azeroth would begin anew. Chapter 12. The Legacy of the Primordial Powers. Long before the first mortal kingdoms built their high stone walls, Azeroth was a violent and chaotic battleground. It was a world of raw, untamed power, where colossal forces fought endlessly for control over a sleeping planet. Today, when we look at the green forests, the deep blue oceans, and the busy cities of the mortal races, we might easily believe that those ancient wars are over. But that is an illusion. The legacy of those primeval powers still flows through the very soil of the world. Every major event in our modern history, and every terrible threat we face today, is deeply tied to the ancient struggles of cosmic monsters, noble dragons, and wild beasts. Their battles did not just shape the physical mountains and valleys of the world, they shaped the destiny of every living soul. Poem. To understand how this legacy continues to rule the present, we must first look into the deepest shadows of the world's past, to the arrival of the old gods. Millions of years ago, mysterious and dark entities known as the Void Lords threw parasitic monsters across the cosmos, hoping they would land on a planet containing a sleeping titan. Several of these colossal, mountainous horrors of flesh, eyes and tentacles crashed into Azeroth. They quickly established the Black Empire, a dark civilization built on absolute chaos, torment and endless war. The old gods, including the mighty Yogg-Saron, the cunning Cthulhu, the mad Yogg-Saron, and the patient N'Zoth, ruled the planet with terrifying cruelty. When the cosmic titans arrived to bring order to the world, they realized that the old gods had burrowed so deep into the planet's crust that they could not be easily removed. When the titan leader Ahn'Qiraj physically ripped Yogg-Saron from the earth, it created a massive bleeding wound in the world's surface that poured out the planet's arcane lifeblood. Realizing that destroying the old gods would destroy Azeroth itself, the titans chose instead to build massive underground prisons to lock the remaining monsters away for eternity. Yet, locking these cosmic monsters in deep dark vaults did not end their influence on the world. The old gods knew they could not win a physical fight against the titans, so they turned to a much more patient and dangerous weapon: whispers. They released a slow, magical plague known as the Curse of Flesh upon the metallic and stone servants that the titans had left behind to guard the planet. This curse did not just make those servants soft and vulnerable, it gave them mortality, deep emotions, and free will. From these cursed, transformed creations came the humans, the dwarves, the gnomes, and many of the other mortal races that walk Azeroth today. This means that the very existence of Azeroth's greatest heroes is a direct result of an old god's ancient plan. Without the Curse of Flesh, there would be no mortal kingdoms to defend the world. The legacy of the Void is written into the very biology of the world's protectors, making them vulnerable to madness, but also giving them the passion and determination needed to survive against impossible odds. The most devastating example of this lingering whisper is the tragic fall of Neltharion, the Black Aspect. He was one of the 5 great dragons chosen by the Titans to guard the earth. Because his domain was the deep ground, he was physically closest to the underground prisons of the old gods. For thousands of years, the dark voices filled his mind, slowly turning his heavy duty into a painful burden and his protective nature into dark paranoia. During the War of the Ancients, he finally broke, betraying his fellow dragonflights and renaming himself Deathwing. He unleashed the Dragon Soul, a weapon of terrible power that shattered the unity of the dragons for 10,000 years. Even though Deathwing was eventually defeated, the scars of his madness, such as the great cataclysm that tore the continents apart, still mark the face of the planet. The Black Dragonflight spent generations trying to cleanse themselves of this dark inheritance, proving that the poison of the old gods can linger and destroy long after the monsters themselves are locked away or defeated. While the old gods worked from the dark corners of the earth, the sky belonged to the dragons. But the majestic dragons we know today were not always the noble protectors of the world. In the beginning, they were wild, primitive, and highly violent creatures called Proto-Dragons. They flew through the elemental storms and hunted across the frozen wastes. The great turning point for their species came when a massive, corrupted proto-dragon named Galakrond grew so large and hungry that he began to consume his own kind, threatening to destroy all life on the planet. 5 brave proto-dragons united to defeat this giant monster. Impressed by their courage, the Titan Keepers decided to share their cosmic power with them. These 5 became the Dragon Aspects, and their followers became the organized Dragonflights. This act of ordering changed the course of history, turning wild beasts into cosmic guardians. However, this transformation created a deep ideological split that has lasted for thousands of years. Not all proto-dragons wanted to accept the gifts and laws of the Titans. Many believed that the Titans were cold invaders who wanted to control and lock away the natural elemental state of Azeroth. These rebels, who called themselves the Primalists, wanted to keep their wild elemental freedom. Led by the powerful Primal Incarnates, they fought a brutal war against the Dragon Aspects. Though the Aspects eventually won and locked the Incarnates away, this ancient conflict was never truly resolved. When the Dragon Isles reawakened in recent years, the Primalists returned, showing that the fight between Titanic Order and Elemental Chaos is still very much alive. The dragons of today must still defend their right to protect the world, constantly questioning whether the order imposed by the Titans was a true blessing or a golden cage, while dragons and cosmic monsters fought for control of the skies and the deep places. Another group of ancient powers took root in the forests and wild lands. These are the wild gods, also known as the Ancients, the Lower, or the August Celestials. Unlike the cosmic old gods, or the ordered dragons, the wild gods are born from the natural life force of Azeroth itself. They are the physical manifestations of nature's beauty, strength, and survival. Creatures like Malorn the White Stag, Aviana the Mistress of Birds, and Goldrin the Great Wolf represent the untamed spirit of the world. They do not care about the grand plans of the Titans or the dark empires of the Void. Their only goal is to protect the natural balance of life. During the War of the Ancients, when the demonic Burning Legion invaded Azeroth, the wild gods sacrificed themselves in great numbers to defend the land, showing that the raw power of nature is just as strong as any cosmic magic. The legacy of the wild gods is deeply connected to the Emerald Dream, a vast green dimension that acts as a blueprint of Azeroth, as if civilization had never existed. Because of their connection to this realm, the wild gods do not truly die. Even when their physical bodies are destroyed in battle, their spirits return to the dream, to heal and wait for the right time to return to the mortal world. This cycle of death and rebirth is a vital shield for Azeroth. Whenever the planet is pushed to the edge of destruction, the wild beasts and their ancient spirits rise up to heal the land. The druids of Azeroth, who learn their magic from these natural spirits, serve as the bridge between civilization and the wild. This ensures that even in the face of industrial ruin or magical corruption, the green heart of the planet continues to beat. Today, the destiny of Azeroth is not decided by just one of these ancient factions. Instead, it is shaped by how these three legacies, the dark ambition of the old gods, the protective order of the dragons, and the wild resilience of the beasts, interact with one another. We see this convergence in every corner of the world. The mortal races, carrying the curse of flesh, use the magic of the Titans to defend the forests of the wild gods from the lingering corruption of the Void. It is a complex web, where every thread is tied to a battle fought millions of years ago. The ancient monsters may be dead or locked away, but their dreams, their laws, and their wild spirits continue to guide the hands of every hero and villain on Azeroth. As we look forward to the future of this world, we must realize that we are not writing a new story. We are simply continuing an ancient chapter. The colossal forces that fought in the primeval ages never truly left. They live on in the red flight's fire, the dark whispers in the deep caverns, and the howling of the wolves in the northern forests. Azeroth is a planet defined by its scars, and its people are the inheritors of a magnificent, dangerous, and eternal struggle. To understand where Azeroth is going, we must always remember the primordial powers that carved its path.